He was a handsome Air Force sergeant who answered his country's call.
He did almost 10 years of service.
His real focus was just elevating his career from sergeant to getting promoted as far as he could.
And she was the woman who'd ride with him to the top.
She was something special. He wanted everybody to know her. This was the one.
They were the perfect couple.
Until a gruesome attack propels their life into tragedy.
3-4 police, what's your emergency?
Somebody trying to kill my boyfriend.
He was stabbed over 60 times.
This is the worst crime scene that I've ever seen in my career as a police officer.
He said, yo, they bodied Spinks.
But was the line of fire intended for someone else?
An individual was stalking her.
Follow me.
I could not believe what I was reading. Just confusion, shock.
The plan was simple. Find the boyfriend, take him out, get the girl.
Somebody's upset you. What can you do?
Or were there other, more deplorable factors at play?
He could not have verbalized those words with the damage that was done to his throat.
They came up with this pact. There was only violence.
January 2010. Residents in Shreveport, Louisiana are enjoying the fresh start of a new decade.
Shreveport is a wonderful place to live. It's a little laid back. We've got a lot of military influence because there's a military base in the adjoining city.
Just outside Shreveport is one of the largest Air Force bases in the world.
Shreveport is home of the Barksdale Air Force Base and is a place where you have friendly people and exciting entertainment.
However, the lively entertainment in Shreveport can come at a price.
Shreveport's very vibrant nightlife. Also comes with a lot of violent crime throughout the nights. There's continual shootings, robberies that kept the city a lot of times not very safe.
Around 4 a.m. on January 17th, a night of typical Shreveport revelry is coming to an end. But one couple's worst nightmare is just beginning.
3-4 police, what's your emergency?
Somebody trying to kill my boyfriend.
Am I going to kill your boyfriend?
The frantic caller identifies herself as 26-year-old Camethea Coleman.
She stated her boyfriend, Brian Spinks, and herself had been viciously attacked.
She said that a man came into her boyfriend's apartment and stabbed him several times.
Okay, is he still there?
I was fighting Mom.
She tried to fight off the attacker, but he stabbed her too.
She sustained injuries as a result, but her boyfriend, Brian, sustained much more severe injuries.
911 operators can hear Brian's voice in the background, so there's still a chance to save him if they move quickly.
Oh. Baby, are you okay? Please help me.
Miss Coleman calling 911 was very, very emotional and crying, screaming.
Okay, I need you to calm down. We're getting police there.
First responders are immediately en route to the scene. But while on the call, the operator can hear Brian's moans become faint and eventually stop.
Say something! Brian! Say something to me, please!
29-year-old Brian Spinks was destined for a life of service to his country.
Brian came from a military family. His grandfather was in the Air Force. My father was in the Army in World War II. Myself, I was in the Marine Corps.
Brian sought to follow his father's footsteps. After graduating high school, he immediately enlisted in the U.S. Air Force.
I was proud that my son decided to follow in military footsteps of his forebears.
Brian loved being in the Air Force and serving his country.
Brian immediately built a reputation as a person who would always go the extra mile for others and show up for his friends and fellow servicemen.
No matter who they were or where they were from, Brian was a man with an open heart and open arms.
Brian also prided himself on being a dedicated father to his 2 children.
There's a lot on him as far as, juggling his time. But Brian really loved his kids, and he really put in a lot of effort to make sure that they were well taken care of.
With his skill and reputation, it didn't take Brian long to earn a promotion to staff sergeant.
Brian was well on his way, climbing the ladder of the military ranks.
After almost 10 years of service with 4 deployments and 2 tours in Iraq, Brian found himself stationed at Barksdale Air Force Base in Shreveport, Louisiana.
It was there Brian met someone who'd change his life forever. 24-year-old Camethea Coleman.
Ooh, man, it's chilly out here tonight.
I know, right?
While at a house party in 2008, destiny struck, and Brian met Camethea. She was different from any woman he'd ever met before.
So you're in the military?
Yeah, Air Force, you know.
Well, I love a man in uniform.
The sparks just kind of flew from there.
Brian was immediately drawn to her. Camethea was the perfect combination of brains and sexy.
I have a career in social work. It's what I've always wanted to do since I was a little girl.
Wow, I mean, that's great.
She attended Grambling State University, where she earned a degree.
She wanted to help others in their lives, and that was something that Brian could relate to. And it didn't take Brian long to become completely head over heels smitten with her.
They began dating not too long after that first meeting.
Soon enough, Brian was proudly introducing Camethea to his loved ones.
He just lit up when he, talked about the possibility of getting to start building a relationship with her. And he was excited about that.
Hey. Well, Dad, this is Camethea.
Oh my gosh, very nice to meet you.
You too, sir.
All right.
She's the first young lady I ever met. She and I connected quite a bit. And I just knew, and he told me, that she was something special.
Brian felt like Camethea completed him in many ways, and to everybody else, they were the perfect couple.
Yeah, she's great.
We were excited for him because we had never really seen him in a real, long-term type of relationship. So I was happy that he met somebody he could potentially see a future with.
I was amazed at how she lit the light bulb in him. This was the one.
But now, the couple's promising future is at risk of being cut short as police and EMS race to Brian's apartment in response to a violent stabbing. They know time is of the essence if they're going to save Brian's life.
As authorities arrive, they come across a grotesquely violent scene.
Camethea is covered in blood, and Brian is even more blood-soaked.
Camethea is crying hysterically.
While paramedics attempt to revive Brian, officers tend to Camethea.
They are asking if she could recall anything about the attacker so that they could, try to catch up with him before he would get too far.
What's his man?
What's he look like? What's he look like, man?
Camethea is just hysterical. She's bleeding, and she couldn't answer any of their questions.
Police are concerned there is a violent man on the loose, but with such few details, they fear he will get away.
Who is this man, and why did he want to harm this young couple?
After spending nearly a decade in the Air Force, 29-year-old Brian Spinks was a young staff sergeant looking forward to the bright future ahead of him.
Brian just wanted to be the best person he could be, the best airman he could be, and the best father he could be.
And his future looked even brighter with his new girlfriend, Camethea Coleman, by his side.
Brian was crazy about that young lady.
So we were all happy for him.
But on January 17th, 2010, first responders have been called to Brian's apartment after a panicked 911 call from Camethea.
Brian is losing blood fast.
They've both been stabbed by an intruder.
Man, tell me what he looks like. Blackout. That's all we got right now.
First responders do everything they can to revive Brian. Unfortunately, though, their work is futile.
Despite their best efforts, first responders were unable to revive Brian. He was pronounced dead on the scene, and this home invasion has now become a murder investigation.
Will Camethea suffer a similar fate?
She has been stabbed 5 times, twice in the abdomen, once on each leg and on one hand.
They quickly take her to the hospital for more treatment.
Meanwhile, homicide detectives arrive to begin their investigation.
As we entered the house and began looking at the victim, we noticed that he had received multiple stab wounds.
Brian's body is covered in stab wounds, over 60 to be exact.
Stab wounds all around the neck. Definitely overkill.
There were multiple stab wounds on his chest and arms.
But 2 wounds in particular stand out to the detectives. A deep stab wound at the base of Brian's neck and a slash across his throat.
He had received a laceration from one ear to the other across his throat.
Obviously, whoever did this did not intend to just rough him up. They intended to kill him.
Blood spatter can be found all over the apartment.
This is the worst crime scene that I've ever seen in my career as a police officer.
By the looks of this gruesome scene, it's clear that the assailant was relentless.
As detectives continue to process the crime scene, they find not 1, but 2 murder weapons.
We noticed the 2 knives laying next to the victim. One of the knife blades was broken.
Most likely, the first knife broke during the midst of all the stabbing, and the second knife was used to finish the job.
As we began reviewing the rest of the residence, we noticed that there were 2 missing knives from the knife block in the kitchen, and the knives that were used to kill the victim appeared to be the same make of the knives that were in the kitchen block.
But what was the killer's motive?
It could not have been robbery because everything in the apartment that was valuable was undisturbed.
There was only violence. Whoever had done this seemed to have a serious grudge against Brian.
When the tragic news reaches Brian's loved ones, they're in disbelief.
They told me that my son has been the victim of a homicide. And immediately denial set in because I started trying to differentiate homicide means he's dead. I didn't know the exact details other than my son was deceased, and I had to get that in to my heart some way.
I had a whole bunch of missed phone calls, and one of the voicemails was from one of our friends that was stationed with us at the base. And I called him back, and he was like, he said, they bodied Spinks. He was like, turn on your computer. And it was just like, stomach dropped. I could not believe what I was reading. Just confusion, shock, sadness.
As one team of investigators continues processing the scene, another begins canvassing the neighborhood for leads.
Brian's neighbor tells detectives, that she thought Brian and Camethea were a lovely couple, and she'd never had any problems with them outside of the occasional loud party.
But last night was different.
The neighbor remembered being awoken due to screaming and yelling.
She was awoken by a commotion around 3:15 that morning. She heard yelling back and forth, but she really couldn't make out the words.
She didn't actually see anything helpful, and neither did anyone else in the neighborhood.
Except for Camethea.
She was really the key to unlocking what happened.
We needed to speak to Camethea Coleman immediately to get more details.
And fortunately, detectives soon received word that Camethea is ready to talk.
Detective Bowen. She's good to go.
They are notified she's in stable condition.
Luckily, her wounds are not fatal.
So once Ms. Coleman was brought from the hospital, she was brought into the detective office.
When detectives meet with Camethea, she is clearly still shaken up. But she says she has something very important to tell them.
She says she knows exactly who killed Brian.
I saw him earlier that day. Saw him riding by.
Camethea reveals she has a stalker, and he is the one who did this.
In the winter of 2010, Shreveport homicide detectives are investigating the brutal slaying of 29-year-old Brian Spinks.
He was stabbed over 60 times with his own kitchen knife. Obviously, whoever did this didn't intend to injure him. They intended to kill him.
Brian's girlfriend, Camethea Coleman, was also stabbed during the attack, but has survived.
Now Camethea is telling the investigators that she knew the attacker.
She was so distraught and emotional at the scene, but now that her mind has settled and she's calmed down, she in fact did recognize the attacker.
I saw him earlier that day. Saw him riding by.
She advised that an individual was stalking her.
What's this guy's name?
John. He said his name was John.
You know what John's last name was? Describe John for me.
He's dark. He's probably like a little taller than me.
She told police that she'd met him at a club a while back.
We were talking, but I told him there would never be anything because I was with Brian.
According to Camethea, John wouldn't take no for an answer.
He was aggressively trying to pursue her, and he'd been following her.
He got the picture, but then he showed back up. He would pop up like in crazy places.
In fact, Camethea says on the afternoon of January 16th, John popped up outside her apartment.
So this was before about 2 or 3 in the afternoon? Mm-hmm. Okay. Did he say anything to you? You just saw him or what? Did y'all talk? Be strong for me, girl, okay? We gotta find out.
Through tears, Camethea tells detectives John didn't say anything to her that afternoon, but later that night, she still couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched.
She'd been out club hopping with her friends, and as the bars began to close, she decided it might be best to go to Brian's house to go to sleep, and she often did when she was out late.
I missed you.
I miss you too. We went over to his apartment. I know. It's painful, okay? But I'm here for you. Tell me what happened when you got to the apartment.
When I got there, we were just talking.
Until the night took a frightening turn.
Suddenly, a man burst through the door. Camethea said she immediately recognized him as John.
Oh, follow me.
Camethea says when John arrived, she was alarmed, but she never could have imagined what happened next.
And I was like, what are you doing here? He went to the kitchen.
That's when John started stabbing Brian.
John, get out. What are you doing?
Oh, what?
Get out.
What the hell you doing, bro? No.
Get out. And he got the knife and he just started jabbing.
Camethea says she was in shock as she watched the violence unfold.
I was looking at John. I was like, get the fuck out of here.
But John was relentless.
The first knife broke during the midst of all the stabbing.
Then he was just using one knife and was stabbing Brian repeatedly. Camethea said she then knew she had to do something.
When Brian was on the ground, I jumped on him.
Please, no.
That's when John turned the knife on her.
No. Stop.
As the investigation into the violent murder of Brian Spinks continues, detectives are speaking with his girlfriend, Camethea Coleman, who was also injured during the crime.
Camethea says that her stalker, who she only knows as John, broke into Brian's apartment and began stabbing him.
When Brian was on the ground, I jumped on him, and that's when he stabbed me on my leg. I know I felt a couple of them.
Camethea says at that point, she runs to grab her phone and call 911.
When John saw this, he slit Brian's throat, plunged a knife into his neck, and ran out of the door.
Camethea said with the phone to her ear, she ran to Brian's side.
I was just shaking on me. I didn't want to get up. I didn't know what to do. I pulled the knife out of Brian.
She removes the knife from his neck, and shortly after, first responders arrive.
Based on the story that Camethea had given detectives, if John had followed her home, it's possible that it was an act of jealousy.
The plan was simple. Find the boyfriend, take him out, get the girl. But detectives know they'll have to investigate further to determine whether or not this was in fact the case.
In their search for more information on the couple, detectives turn to Brian and Camethea's friends, and what they discover is eye-opening.
Camethea had a dark side to her.
Brian had dropped some lines to me about like, hey man, she's, Kim kind of crazy. We started seeing a change in their relationship, and she was being clingy and asking more questions about what he was doing and stuff like that.
What are you talking to, Brian?
Camethea always thought that he was looking for another person to be with.
I'm not letting you see my phone. No, stop.
Her behavior over Brian became controlling.
She was becoming more and more compulsive. We wake up in the middle of the night, she's in his phone. She's looking under the bed. She's looking in the closet, looking for something that wasn't there.
You're acting crazy.
What did you just call me?
Friends say, despite the tumultuous nature of their relationship, Camethea even began pressuring Brian to get married.
For Brian, this was too much, and he began to feel suffocated in the relationship.
Brian has a son and a daughter, and he was doing his regular Air Force job and school. And he just wanted a little time to himself sometime.
So Brian decided to distance himself from Camethea.
I need some space.
What?
I need some space.
No, you can't.
No, I'm
you
done.
Can't leave, Brian.
No.
But Camethea wasn't having it.
There are times where we've been out and we saw Kim at different places.
She was popping up everywhere. Anytime he and his friends went out for drinks, went out to the club, anything, she was there, and it was quickly becoming a problem.
It was starting to sound like Camethea was the true stalker.
Friends say the situation came to a head on the night of January 16th, the same night Brian was killed.
It was just a regular night. You know, we went downtown, we were having drinks, listening to music.
Brian was in the club, and he was doing what they call the Texas two-step with this young lady. This young lady was the girlfriend of one of Brian's good friends, and her boyfriend is present as well.
But then Camethea showed up.
As soon as Camethea came face to face with the woman, all hell broke loose.
What the hell do you think you're doing?
Stop it.
My man.
They couldn't believe that she had started a fight in the club.
Back up. No, no,
Camethea Coleman has told Shreveport detectives that her boyfriend, Brian Spinks, was killed by her jealous stalker, who she only knows as John. But now detectives are wondering if the true stalker is Camethea.
He was trying to separate himself. She was trying to control him.
Brian's friends say Camethea's possessive behavior came to a head on the night of his death.
Brian had gone out with some of his friends. Everyone was drinking. And then Miss Coleman appeared at that establishment.
She saw Brian hanging out with another woman who was actually just a friend and completely lost it.
What the hell do you think you're doing? This is my man, and you better stay away from him.
Camethea began screaming at her to stay away from Brian.
Don't tell me to relax. Don't tell me to relax. No, I know you was cheating on me, Brian.
People were trying to calm her down, telling her to relax. We pulled her off to the side and we're like, hey, man, chill out. Like, you know, we're all having a good time. He cares about you. He loves you. Just relax.
Don't tell me to relax. Don't tell me to relax.
Camethea had clearly gone off the handle, and it didn't go unnoticed by Brian.
No.
That's it.
Brian.
I'm done.
No, you're not done.
That's
We're
it.
not done. Don't you walk away from me, Brian. It's not over. Don't walk away. Get off of me. Get off of me.
He had had enough of that type of reaction from her. And I think he just was fed up with it and was like, I don't want to deal with this anymore. At that point, Brian told one of my friends, like, look, just take me home.
On the ride home, Brian decided to end his relationship with Camethea for good.
Brian's friend stated that he had left a voicemail saying, I am done with you.
After speaking with Brian's friends, detectives think they now know the real reason Camethea went over to Brian's house that night.
If Brian finally pulled the plug on their relationship, it's likely that Camethea was not there just to talk. She went to his home to confront him.
At this point, Camethea Coleman has made the shift from innocent victim to suspect number one.
She does have every motive to do Brian harm.
They believe it's time to have another sit-down with Camethea Coleman.
Investigators called Camethea in with no trouble under the guise of following up on Brian's investigation.
Once she arrived, they informed her that she was now a suspect in Brian's murder.
What happened last night?
What I told you.
You do realize that if I prove that you're lying to me, that you're going to go to jail for the rest of your life. You do not come out of prison on a murder charge in Louisiana. So I'm giving you the opportunity now to set the record straight, okay?
But Camethea isn't budging.
She sticks to her original statement, saying John, her stalker, is the main suspect they need to be looking into.
What do you want to find? I mean, I've told you.
I want to find out the honest truth. How many times you guys have been knocked down, dragged out, getting into it?
Although Camethea continues to insist she didn't kill Brian, she does admit that their relationship had become rocky in recent months.
I need some space.
We're dating, but I mean, we've been off and on for I don't know how long.
She also admits that she ran into Brian at the club that night, but says it wasn't planned.
We learned that Brian and Camethea had made a pact if they were going to go out separately, not to go to the same establishment.
They both agreed that spending quality time away from each other was important for a successful relationship.
We just never go to the same club together. It was just our thing.
But Camethea claims on the night of January 16th, she accidentally showed up at the same club Brian and his friends were already at.
When she saw him, she approached him and calmly asked him not to be mad at her.
I was calm. I just wanted to talk to him.
But it was no use. She said that Brian was livid.
You keep doing this. I need you to.
He was like, "Why were you there?" And he was pissed. He was mad at me.
She advised that she had gone to the apartment to talk to Brian to try and calm things over because of what happened at the club, trying to work things out with him. But Brian was not having it.
I told you you don't listen.
Camethea says he began squeezing her hand very hard and it hurt.
Go. He just I told you.
She claimed that Brian grabbed her throat with one hand and started choking her.
Camethea says she was eventually able to free herself.
You jerked away.
Mm-hmm.
She says she was trying to get out of his apartment immediately.
Was like pushed you. I went to the knife out.
He pulled the knife out.
Mm-hmm.
Camethea told investigators he had stabbed her several times before she could get away from him.
And I pushed him. And I was like, if I don't do something, I'll kill you.
So when she freed herself, she dashed to the kitchen to arm herself.
She then confessed to stabbing him, however, stated it was self-defense because Brian had attacked her previously and she was afraid for him to attack her again.
So I was still next to him.
So he just kept stabbing. When did his throat get cut? Because it was cut bad.
Once again, she blames that on this mysterious John character.
So he showed up in the middle of y'all fighting?
Mm-hmm. Somebody's upset with you. What can you do?
Camethea stated that in an attempt to protect her, John took the knife away from Brian and began stabbing him harder and deeper.
Camethea says she begged him to stop, but John was insistent on killing Brian.
I didn't want to go that far. I was just trying to protect myself. I did not want to go that far.
But detectives know that Camethea's story doesn't add up.
All of the evidence collectively was telling that Camethea was the likely murderer, and John the intruder didn't exist.
At this point, Camethea realizes she's in hot water, so she decides to lawyer up.
I get a return, please.
That's what you want.
Mm-hmm.
Time now is 09:21. Ms. Coleman is requesting an attorney. All tapes stop this time.
Regardless of Camethea's new story, investigators have enough to arrest her and charge her with Brian's murder.
But will justice ever be served in this case?
Camethea pleaded not guilty due to reason of insanity.
She was definitely putting on a show.
In January of 2010, Shreveport investigators have Camethea Coleman in custody for the murder of her estranged boyfriend, Brian Spinks.
When I found out that she was under arrest for this, the shock just got even more amplified because this was somebody that he cared about, that we thought cared about him.
The commanding officer called me and he said, she's the one that did it. I said, no way. There's no way. He said, yes, no way did she do it. Yes, she did.
Even with Camethea behind bars, investigators are still discovering additional evidence against her.
A forensic medical examiner studies both Brian's autopsy report as well as Camithia's medical records from the night of the murder.
What they determined was that Camithia's 5 stab wounds were self-inflicted.
Investigators can only assume that Camithia stabbed herself to make it look like she acted in self-defense.
And in the months leading up to trial, Camithia continues going to extreme lengths to avoid taking responsibility for Brian's death.
Camithia pleaded not guilty due to reason of insanity. She stated that she'd blacked out and was completely unaware of what she had done to Brian.
And in July of 2011, she was found to be mentally incompetent to stand trial.
It takes more than a year from Brian's murder for Camithia to undergo enough psychiatric treatment to be deemed fit for trial.
She went to 3 different doctors for competency. And one of the doctors said that she was malingering, that they kind of knew that, that she was acting as if something was wrong with her when there was nothing wrong with her. She was definitely competent and was putting on a show, basically.
On April 23, 2012, Camithia Coleman finally stands before judge and jury.
Camithia stands by her plea of not guilty due to self-defense. She claims she was in a very abusive relationship with Brian, and that night was only the last in a long history of violent nights.
Brian was the opposite of violent. When her defense started saying that, we knew it was way far from the truth that any of that would have ever taken place.
We were all in pain, watching them trying to make my son into a woman abuser with no evidence. She never told anybody she ever got hit, no scratches, no bruises, no reports, no nothing.
When it's their turn, prosecutors describe what they believe actually happened the night Brian was killed.
They believe that Camithia went to confront him about the incident at the club.
Please,
No,
I just
Kim,
want to.
no, Kim,
Can you
I
please
am
listen? I just
done.
want to
No,
talk to you.
talk about what? Kim,
No.
it's over.
Brian said that things are over, and that's when she decided that if she couldn't have him, no one would.
Prosecutors believe that once Brian's back was turned, Camithia grabbed a knife from the butcher's block and stabbed him in the back.
Sick and tired of this.
They argued that then Brian stumbled into the living room where Camithia continued her vicious attack, stabbing him so many times that the knife broke.
Camithia could have stopped there.
But she went back to retrieve another knife after the first steak knife was broken. And she continued to stab him and stab him and stab him.
And then when she felt like Brian wouldn't survive, she called 911 to appear like a concerned girlfriend.
Help me. Somebody trying to kill my boyfriend.
However, Camithia didn't expect Brian to start speaking when she was on the phone with 911.
Concerned that he might say something that gave her away, prosecutors believe that then, with one final push, Camithia inflicted the fatal wound to Brian's throat to keep him quiet.
During the trial, the coroner pointed out that Brian could not have verbalized those words with the damage that was done to the front part of his throat, which means that damage was done to his throat after she made the phone call.
Prosecutors believe that in order to sell her self-defense claim, Camithia turned the knife on herself and made up the bogus story about John the stalker to lead police off her trail.
They believe her story about John was completely fabricated and he did not exist.
A lot of people ask me, like, he was in the military. Why didn't he fight her off? He's not a fighter. He's not an aggressive person. Some of the defense marks that we found out that were on him, he was clearly just, balled up, trying to survive, trying to live.
When the jury retires to deliberate, they side with prosecutors.
They unanimously found Camithia guilty of second-degree murder.
Camithia Coleman is sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
she got what she deserved. She does not need to be on the streets anywhere for the crime that she committed.
When you hear the words, there is joy, but not joy in a happy way. More a joy and a relief that none of the lies that she said the jury believed. Relief that justice has been, served. And that his family could, start the grieving process, start moving on.
Nobody won anything that night. 2 families lost their children forever. Yeah, she's getting jailed the rest of her life, but what did anybody win? It didn't bring Brian back.
The world lost a good person, a person that really cared about the people that were in his life.
Brian was crazy about that young lady. And that's the part that hurts. He was murdered by somebody he loved.
He had run the license plate, and the vehicle was registered to Robert Reeves. Across the highway on the westbound shoulder, he had noticed a white sedan matching Latrice's vehicle. When confronted with this information, Pastor Reeves denied being on the highway, insisting he had been asleep. He claimed Stephen must have borrowed his car. However, Stephen denied using the pastor's car that night. Investigators interviewed Reeves' sister, Willa Mae Thorpe, who supposedly attended the same church service as her brother on the night of the murder. She stated that she had not seen him at the service. Furthermore, detectives noticed deep scratches and abrasions on Reeves' arms and hands. Reeves claimed he had injured himself while moving a desk with Stephen. But Stephen had no recollection of any such incident. The psychological profile of Robert Reeves began to unravel when Stephen revealed a disturbing encounter. Stephen explained that the pastor had grown increasingly intrusive regarding his personal life. On one occasion, Reeves had made explicit sexual advances toward Stephen, offering to waive his rent in exchange for sexual favors. Stephen had rejected the advances. Subpoenaed phone records for Pastor Reeves confirmed that the anonymous blocked threatening calls to Stephen and Velma had been placed from Reeves' personal phone. It became clear that Reeves was harboring an intense, obsessive infatuation with his young roommate. He viewed any female partner of Stephen's, including Latrice, as a threat to his desire for control. Forensic science provided the final, undeniable link. The state crime lab processed the DNA from Latrice's abandoned car. A DNA profile recovered from the interior of the vehicle belonged to Robert Reeves. The prosecution's theory was clear. On the night of January 29th, Robert Reeves, consumed by jealousy and obsession, followed Latrice as she left his home. He pursued her onto Interstate 540, signaled her to pull over, and launched a savage attack, utilizing his knowledge of Stephen's movements to attempt to frame the young athlete. During the trial, which began on September 29, 2009, the defense argued that Stephen Randolph had the stronger motive due to the pregnancy scare. They pointed out that Stephen's DNA was found under Latrice's fingernails. The prosecution countered that this DNA was the result of their intimate contact earlier that evening, whereas Reeves' DNA in the car and the Scratches on his arms could not be explained by innocent contact. The jury rejected the defense's arguments. Robert Reeves was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The case exposed the dark reality of a predator hiding behind a mask of community leadership, and it brought a somber closure to a family devastated by a crime born of pure, obsessive envy. The volatile burden of mistrust and the case of Officer Wayne Irby. Our final case study takes us to the quiet community of Little Elm, Texas, where we examine the tragic culmination of domestic volatility and the psychological phenomenon of denial. On the morning of December 10th, 2004, the Little Elm Police Department experienced an unusual disruption. Officer Wayne Irby, a dedicated 6-year veteran of the force, failed to report for his 6 o'clock morning shift. Wayne was known for his punctuality and passion for his work, making his unexplained absence an immediate cause for concern among his colleagues. Wayne's partner, Jerry Walker, grew increasingly worried as the hours passed. Without response to phone calls, Chief of Police Waylon Rhodes dispatched officers to conduct a welfare check at the home Wayne shared with his girlfriend, 44-year-old Denise Miller, and her 2 children. Upon arrival, officers found the house locked and empty, with no vehicles in the driveway. They contacted Denise's children, Whitney and Walter, who had gone to school. The children reported that they had not seen their mother or Wayne since the previous evening. Whitney mentioned receiving a brief, unusual phone call from her mother around midnight, telling her she was running errands and expressing her love, which felt out of character. Determined to find his partner, Jerry Walker, accompanied by Officer James Wynn, decided to search a rental property that Wayne had recently leased during a brief separation from Denise. Using a key obtained from the landlord, they entered the residence. In the kitchen, they discovered Wayne's personal cell phone and his daily utility pack. Sensing immediate danger, they proceeded down the hallway. There, they discovered Wayne Irby lying face down on the floor. He had been shot once in the back of the head. His duty belt was found hanging elsewhere, but his service weapon was missing. The loss of an officer sent shockwaves through the department. Because of Wayne's active role in community policing, investigators initially considered whether the homicide was work-related. However, those close to Wayne pointed to the highly volatile nature of his relationship with Denise Miller. Denise was a divorced mother who had relocated to Little Elm to build a stable life for her children. She was successful in her career with a local distributor, but her relationship with Wayne, which began in 2003, was plagued by intense jealousy and mistrust. Denise suspected Wayne of being unfaithful, a suspicion fueled by his outgoing, charismatic personality on his beat. In December of 2003, Denise had filed a domestic violence complaint against Wayne after confronting him at his rental home while another woman was present. During that confrontation, a physical altercation occurred. leaving Wayne with visible scratches and a bruised eye. Denise later withdrew the complaint, claiming she had fabricated the details, and the couple reconciled. However, the pattern of behavior continued. Friends reported that Denise would call Wayne's phone incessantly when he was on duty. By December of 2004, Wayne had decided to end the relationship permanently and was preparing to move back into his rental home. As investigators processed the home Wayne and Denise had shared, they discovered a handwritten note in the master bedroom. The note, written by Denise, expressed profound despair and despondency, suggesting she was contemplating ending her life. Furthermore, on the kitchen island of Wayne's rental home, investigators located a second note in Denise's handwriting, which read, "I am sorry I took both of our lives. Please contact our moms." An all-points bulletin was issued for Denise Miller and her vehicle. Investigators feared she might pose a danger to other officers or herself. At approximately 4 o'clock in the morning on December 11th, 2004, the night manager of a hotel in Gainesville, Texas, received a distress call from room 1047. When management entered the room, they discovered Denise Miller lying on the floor, suffering from a gunshot wound to her head, just above her eye. A .25 caliber handgun lay near her on the floor. Investigators also recovered Wayne's missing service pistol from the room. An examination of the service pistol revealed that Denise had attempted to load it, but had inserted the ammunition backwards, causing the weapon to jam. She had then used the smaller caliber handgun to shoot herself. She had also consumed alcohol and sleeping pills. Denise survived the suicide attempt but was rushed to a trauma center in critical condition. In her hotel room, investigators discovered a third, longer note. In this writing, Denise claimed that Wayne's shooting had been a tragic accident and that she had fled in a state of panic. Texas Ranger Tracy Murphy interviewed Denise at her bedside once doctors deemed her stable enough to speak. Denise's cognitive abilities had been severely impacted by the trauma to her brain. She was partially paralyzed, blind in one eye, and claimed to have no memory of the events in Little Elm. When informed that Wayne was dead, she appeared genuinely shocked, repeating that she had not harmed him. In criminal psychology, this memory loss can be attributed to psychogenic amnesia, where the mind suppresses a highly traumatic event to protect itself from overwhelming guilt, or organic amnesia resulting from physical trauma to the brain. Regardless of her mental state, investigators had to rely on physical evidence. Ballistics testing confirmed that the bullet recovered from Wayne's had been fired from the .25 caliber handgun found beside Denise in the hotel room. The weapon belonged to her stepfather. Investigators also noted that the trigger pull on that specific handgun required approximately 5 pounds of pressure, making an accidental discharge highly improbable. Furthermore, the entry wound was located at the back of Wayne's head, indicating he was shot from behind, which contradicted any claim of an accidental struggle. On January 18, 2005, Denise Miller was officially charged with murder. After 18 months of intensive medical rehabilitation, she was declared competent to stand trial. The trial began on July 10, 2006. Denise appeared in the courtroom in a wheelchair, visibly frail. The prosecution presented the physical evidence, the ballistics report, and the confession notes left at the scenes. They argued that Denise, unable to accept Wayne's decision to leave her, went to his rental home with a loaded firearm and shot him as he turned his back. The defense maintained that the shooting was an accident, pointing to her third note as a dying declaration of truth. However, the prosecution emphasized that her subsequent actions, failing to call for emergency medical assistance and fleeing the scene, were indicative of intent and guilt. The jury found Denise Miller guilty of murder. On July 12, 2006, she was sentenced to 62 years in prison. The verdict brought a solemn end to a tragic cycle of domestic escalation, serving as a reminder of the devastating consequences of unresolved possessiveness. Reflections on justice and community awareness. These three cases, though distinct in their locations and participants, share a common thread: the destructive power of toxic control and the tragedy that occurs when boundaries are ignored. Tanisha Stewart, Latrice Curtis, and Wayne Irby were individuals with vibrant lives, families, and futures. Their lives were cut short by individuals who valued their own desires and obsessions above the humanity of others. For communities, these cases highlight the critical importance of recognizing the early warning signs of relationship violence and obsessive behavior. Excessive monitoring, jealousy, physical intimidation, and threats are not indicators of love. They are the precursors to control and, in the worst cases, violence. Through the meticulous efforts of law enforcement officers, forensic scientists, and community members, the truth in each of these cases was brought to light. Justice was served, not through vengeance, but through a commitment to truth, scientific precision, and the rule of law. By remembering these stories, we honor the victims and reinforce our collective commitment to building a safer, more empathetic society where such tragedies can be prevented. The human heart is capable of reaching the highest peaks of selflessness, yet, when untethered from reason and consumed by the dark currents of obsession, it can descend into the deepest valleys of tragedy. In the study of criminal psychology, we often observe that the most horrific acts do not originate from external forces or anonymous strangers, but from within the very sanctuaries where individuals seek warmth, validation, and love, relationships that begin with the promise of a lifetime of shared joy can, under the influence of insecurity, jealousy, and possessive control, transform into arenas of destruction. To understand these transformations is not to excuse them, but to equip ourselves with the knowledge necessary to recognize the early warning signs of relational dysfunction before they escalate into violence. By examining the intricate psychological pathways of those who choose to destroy what they claim To cherish, we honor the memory of the victims and shine a light on the tireless, methodical efforts of the investigators who bring truth to the surface. Our journey takes us through 3 distinct landscapes: the quiet, suburban neighborhoods of North Texas, the bustling metropolitan expanses of Houston, and the academic environments of North Carolina. In each case, we will observe how dedicated public servants and community members worked in unison to dismantle webs of deception and restore the scales of justice. Chapter 1: The Little Elm Tragedy. The winter air in North Texas during the month of December is typically crisp and quiet, carrying with it the anticipation of the coming holidays. In the city of Gainesville, located just a short distance from the Oklahoma border, the evening of December 11th, 2004, began in a similarly tranquil fashion. The streets were quiet, and the local businesses were winding down for the night. However, as the early morning hours approached, the silence of the night was shattered by a sequence of events that would expose a deeply troubled relationship and initiate a complex multi-jurisdictional investigation. Just past 4 o'clock in the morning, a night manager working the front desk at a local hotel received an alarming phone call from one of the guest rooms. The voice on the other end of the line was faint, slurred, and clearly in distress. Recognizing the immediate need for intervention, the manager hurried down the dimly lit hallway to investigate the room in question, which was registered under room number 1047. Upon reaching the door, the manager knocked firmly, calling out to the occupant. He received no coherent response, only muffled sounds of distress. Attempting to open the door with his master key, the manager found his progress blocked by the deadbolt, which had been securely engaged from the inside. Understanding that time was of the essence, the manager contacted the hotel maintenance worker and instructed him to break down the door. With a heavy shoulder and a firm push, the door gave way, allowing the 2 men to step inside the darkened room. The sight that greeted them was deeply unsettling. The room was in a state of complete disarray, with personal belongings, bedding, and empty containers scattered across the floor. Lying in a crumpled, almost fetal position on the carpet was a lone female guest. She was bleeding profusely from a severe head injury, and her speech was entirely incoherent. Beside the injured woman lay a small, silver .25 caliber handgun. The night manager immediately retreated to the phone and dialed the emergency services number 911, requesting urgent medical and police assistance. Within minutes, the quiet hotel hallway was filled with the flashing red and blue lights of emergency vehicles. Police officers from the Gainesville Police Department were the first to arrive on the scene. They found a chaotic and highly sensitive situation. Their primary objective was to preserve the life of the injured woman, who was slipping in and out of consciousness. Emergency medical technicians arrived shortly thereafter, assessing the wound. The bullet had entered the woman's head just above her eye, a devastating injury that made her survival highly uncertain. As the medical team stabilized her and rushed her to a nearby trauma center. Investigators at the hotel began the painstaking process of documenting the scene. They noted the presence of alcohol, containers, over-the-counter sleeping pills, and personal items scattered throughout the room. The immediate question facing the investigators was whether they were looking at an attempted suicide or a violent assault where the perpetrator had fled the scene. The locked deadbolt suggested the former, yet the disarray of the room left open the possibility of a struggle. The mystery deepened significantly when officers ran a check on the identity of the registered guest and discovered her name was Denise Miller. The name immediately triggered a critical alert in the law enforcement databases. Just 24 hours earlier, Denise Miller and her boyfriend, a 37-year-old police officer named Wayne Irby, had been reported missing from their home in the nearby town of Little Elm, Texas. Officer Irby, a dedicated 6-year veteran of the Little Elm Police Department, had failed to report for his scheduled 6 o'clock morning shift on December 10th, 2004. For a man who lived and breathed his profession, a man of whom his colleagues said he bled blue, failing to show up for duty without notice was entirely unprecedented. The simultaneous disappearance of a police officer and his partner raised immediate red flags across the region. To understand how this dedicated officer and his companion arrived at such a tragic juncture, investigators had to reconstruct the preceding 24 hours and delve deep into the psychological history of their relationship. Denise Miller had grown up in Kansas City, Missouri, where she was remembered as a popular, vibrant, and personable young woman. She was bubbly, sweet, and possessed an innate ability to make those around her feel comfortable. At the age of 22, she married her college sweetheart, and the couple welcomed 2 children, a daughter named Whitney and a son named Walter. However, as the years progressed, the marriage began to falter, ultimately ending in divorce in 1995. Seeking a fresh start and a clean slate for herself and her children, the 36-year-old Denise relocated to the close-knit suburb of Little Elm, Texas. She secured a lucrative position with a local liquor distributor, managed her finances prudently, and was eventually able to build a beautiful, spacious home for her family. To external observers, Denise had achieved the suburban dream. She had a successful career, a stunning home, and 2 well-behaved, loving children. Yet, she still desired a supportive partner to share in her success. That desire seemed to find its answer in 2003 when Officer Wayne Irby knocked on her front door. The visit was purely professional. Wayne had noticed her garage door was left open and wished to warn her of recent opportunistic thefts in the neighborhood. He handed her his business card, offering his assistance should she ever need it. Denise was immediately struck by Wayne's strong, protective presence and his warm, engaging demeanor. Wayne was a divorced father himself, deeply committed to his community and widely respected on his beat. It was not long before he returned to her home, this time to ask her out on a date. The connection was instantaneous. After their very first date, they became exclusive and Wayne integrated seamlessly into the lives of Denise's children, who grew to view him as a father figure. However, beneath the surface of this seemingly perfect romance, the corrosive element of pathological jealousy began to take root. Denise, perhaps scarred by the dissolution of her previous marriage, harbored deep-seated insecurities. She began to suspect that Wayne, who possessed a naturally friendly and charismatic personality, was overly familiar with other women he encountered during his police patrols. She confronted him repeatedly, accusations which Wayne vehemently denied, explaining that his friendliness was simply a component of his community policing philosophy. These confrontations began to erode the trust within the relationship. In the psychological landscape of domestic partnerships, when one partner suffers from persistent, unfounded suspicions, it creates a toxic cycle. The accused partner feels constantly monitored and unjustly criticized, while the accusing partner interprets every defensive reaction as proof of guilt. Despite these underlying tensions, the couple attempted to solidify their commitment by purchasing a home together in 2004, yet cohabitation only intensified the friction. The arguments regarding trust and fidelity grew more frequent and intense, leading Wayne to make the difficult decision to end the relationship and move into a separate rental home across town. The separation was painful, accompanied by many tears and emotional pleas. However, when Denise unexpectedly lost her employment in November of that year, Wayne's protective instincts overrode his concerns about their compatibility. Unwilling to see Denise and her children face financial instability or potential homelessness, Wayne agreed to reconcile and moved back into her home to help support the family. This reconciliation, born out of obligation and protective concern rather than resolve trust issues, set the stage for the events of December 10th, 2004. When Wayne failed to appear for his morning briefing, his partner, Jerry Walker, and colleague, Cynthia Medrano, immediately knew something was wrong. After the police chief dispatched officers to conduct a welfare check at the residence Denise and Wayne shared, they found the house quiet, with no vehicles in the driveway and the doors securely locked. The officers then located Denise's teenage children, Whitney and Walter, at their school. The children revealed that they had not seen their mother or Wayne since the previous day. More disturbingly, Whitney recounted a phone call she had received from her mother around midnight. Denise had claimed she was running errands, told her children she loved them, and instructed them on how to prepare themselves for school the following morning. The tone of the call was highly uncharacteristic, carrying an undercurrent of finality that alarmed the young girl. Realizing the gravity of the situation, Officer Jerry Walker and another colleague, James Wynn, decided to search the rental property that Wayne had recently vacated but still maintained across town. Utilizing a key obtained from the landlord, the officers entered the quiet house, calling out Wayne's name. In The kitchen, they discovered Wayne's personal fanny pack and his cellular phone, items he never traveled without. Stepping further down the hallway, Officer Wynne peered into a back room and suddenly gasped, backing away. He instructed Walker to stay back, but the partner's instinct was too strong. Lying on the floor of the room was Officer Wayne Irby. He was deceased, the victim of a single gunshot wound to the back of his head. The discovery of the deceased officer transformed the missing persons case into a homicide investigation. The location of the wound suggested that Wayne had been shot from behind, indicating he likely never saw his assailant or expected the attack. Because there were no signs of forced entry or a struggle within the rental home, investigators immediately focused their attention on those closest to him. Given Denise's sudden disappearance, the history of intense jealousy, and the empty holster of Wayne's duty weapon found in the master closet of their shared home, the suspicion pointing toward Denise became overwhelming. This suspicion was solidified when crime scene investigators discovered a handwritten note in the master bedroom of the shared residence. The note, written by Denise, contained a desperate plea, expressing that she was tired of hurting and could no longer bear the pain. A second, even more damning note was discovered on the kitchen island of Wayne's rental home where his body lay. In this letter, Denise apologized for her actions, writing that she was sorry and had taken both of their lives and requested that their families be contacted. The evidence pointed toward a murder-suicide plot where the perpetrator had fled the scene to complete the final act of self-destruction. The Gainesville Hotel room discovery confirmed this theory, yet the outcome had not gone entirely according to Denise's apparent plan. When investigators examined the hotel room, they found Wayne's service weapon, a .40 caliber pistol, which had jammed. It appeared Denise had attempted to load the weapon but had inserted a bullet backward, rendering the firearm inoperable. Frustrated or desperate, she had then turned to the .25 caliber handgun, which she had obtained from her stepfather. She pulled the trigger, but the bullet did not cause immediate death, leaving her severely injured and disoriented on the hotel floor. As Denise lay in the hospital, fighting for her life under police guard, investigators sought to obtain a statement. Texas Ranger Tracy Murphy conducted a bedside interview once doctors deemed her conscious enough to communicate. However, the trauma of the gunshot wound had severely impacted Denise's cognitive abilities. When questioned about the events in Little Elm and the death of Wayne Irby, Denise exhibited profound confusion and memory loss. She denied any knowledge of the shooting, repeatedly stating that Wayne was not dead and that she had not harmed him. This memory loss presented a complex psychological and legal challenge. Was Denise experiencing genuine retrograde amnesia brought on by physical trauma to her brain, or was she utilizing a psychological defense mechanism to shield herself from the immense guilt of her actions? In criminal law, a defendant must be competent to stand trial, meaning they must understand the charges against them and be able to assist in their own defense. Denise was transferred to a specialized rehabilitation facility where she spent 18 months undergoing intensive physical and cognitive therapy. The self-inflicted wound had left her permanently disabled, bound to a wheelchair, partially paralyzed on one side of her body, and blind in one eye. Eventually, medical professionals declared her competent, and her trial commenced on July 10, 2006, at the Denton County Courthouse. During the trial, the prosecution presented a meticulous case, urging the jury not to let their sympathy for Denise's frail, disabled physical appearance obscure the gravity of her actions. They described her as a possessively jealous partner who, upon realizing that Wayne was determined to leave the relationship, permanently decided that if she could not have him, no one else would. To counter the defense's argument that the shooting had been a tragic accident, the prosecution introduced evidence from the state crime lab. Forensic testing of the .25 caliber handgun revealed that the weapon required 4.5 to 5 pounds of pressure to pull the trigger, completely undermining the theory of an accidental discharge. Furthermore, the prosecution highlighted Denise's actions immediately following the shooting, rather than calling for medical assistance for Wayne. She had penned a confession note, taken his service weapon, and fled the scene. The jury deliberated for less than 1 hour before returning a verdict of guilty of first-degree murder. At the sentencing phase, the jury took into account Denise's severe physical limitations and spared her the maximum penalty of death, instead sentencing her to 62 years in prison. It was a tragic conclusion to a relationship that had begun with such bright promise. The case serves as a somber reminder of the destructive nature of obsessive control and the profound tragedy that occurs when love is replaced by a desperate, violent need for possession. The family of Wayne Irby was left to mourn a dedicated public servant, while Denise's children were left to grapple with the reality that their mother had destroyed the very family they had sought to build. Chapter 2: The Snuff Star of Houston. The city of Houston, Texas, is a sprawling metropolis defined by its diversity, industrial strength, and vibrant communities. Within its tough inner city neighborhoods, families often work tirelessly to provide their children with opportunities for a better life. For the family of Tanisha Stewart, a 19-year-old young woman, those hopes were centered on her exceptional academic talents and her bright, ambitious spirit. Tanisha was one of 6 children raised in a challenging environment, having lost her father at an early age. Despite these hardships, she refused to let her circumstances define her potential. She was an outstanding student, dedicated to her books, and possessed an infectious smile that endeared her to teachers, friends, and peers alike. Tanisha's academic dedication culminated in a major milestone when she earned a full scholarship to Texas Agricultural and Mechanical University, a prestigious institution located approximately 2 hours north of Houston. For her family, particularly her sister Gayla Taylor, Tanisha was a shining star destined to accomplished great things. However, her promising journey was tragically interrupted during her spring break in March of 2007, what began as a celebratory trip home to visit family and friends quickly descended into a harrowing mystery that would test the resolve of the Houston community and the expertise of local homicide investigators. The narrative of Tanisha's disappearance began on Sunday, March 18th, 2007. Her sister, Gayla, returned home from church services to find a series of frantic phone calls from their mother. Tanisha had failed to show up for a highly anticipated concert featuring the artist Beyoncé, an event she had planned to attend with her close friends. For Tanisha, who was exceptionally reliable and maintained constant contact with her family, missing such an event without communication was deeply alarming. As 36 hours passed with no word from her, the family's concern turned to terror. They contacted the local sheriff's department to file a missing persons report, prompting investigators to begin tracing her final known movements. The investigation quickly centered on Tanisha's complex personal relationships. In May of 2005, while working at a local pizza restaurant, a 17-year-old Tanisha had met a coworker named Timothy Shepard. Timothy, who was 25 years old at the time, was persistent in his pursuit of her. Despite the 8-year age gap, Tanisha eventually agreed to go out with him, and the relationship quickly deepened into a serious romance. Timothy made a concerted effort to ingratiate himself with Tanisha's family, helping with household chores, fixing electronic devices, and presenting himself as a supportive, reliable partner. The family welcomed him, viewing him as a positive influence in her life. However, the dynamic of the relationship underwent a dramatic shift when Tanisha relocated to the university campus in the fall of 2006. As Tanisha embraced her independence, met new friends, and excelled in her studies, Timothy began to exhibit signs of extreme possessiveness and control. The physical distance between Houston and the university campus exacerbated his insecurities. He would call her incessantly, and on several occasions he drove the 2 hours to the campus, wandering the grounds in an attempt to monitor her activities when she did not answer his phone calls. During her freshman year, Timothy briefly ended the relationship to pursue an old acquaintance, a decision that left Tanisha devastated. However, he quickly regretted the choice, traveled to the university to apologize, and persuaded her to resume their courtship. Yet Tanisha had evolved. She was no longer the impressionable teenager he had met at the restaurant. She was becoming an independent adult, a transition that Timothy found deeply threatening. When Tanisha returned to Houston for her spring break in March of 2007, she sought to balance her time between Timothy and her childhood friends. On the evening of Wednesday, March 14th, she hung out with a college friend named Mark Marks. Mark and Tanisha had recently begun a casual relationship at school, a development that Tanisha had been honest about with her close friends. Around 3 o'clock in the morning on Thursday, March 15th, Timothy picked Tanisha up from a friend's apartment to bring her back to his residence. During the drive, Tanisha received a phone call from Mark. The early morning communication ignited Timothy's jealousy, leading to a heated confrontation upon their arrival at his apartment. When investigators first questioned Timothy Shepard regarding Tanisha's disappearance, he appeared cooperative. He admitted that they had argued about the phone call from Mark, but claimed that they had agreed to discuss the matter after sleeping. According to Timothy, when they woke up later that morning, he attempted to resume the conversation, but Tanisha refused, stating she was tired of his control and wished to enjoy her spring break. Timothy claimed that Tanisha then stormed out of his apartment, walking away on foot, and that he had not seen or heard from her since. Because Timothy's account was consistent, and he voluntarily granted permission for investigators to search his apartment, police initially had no legal grounds to detain him. The initial search of his apartment revealed no obvious signs of foul play. Detectives then turned their attention to Mark Marks, wondering if a second jealous partner could be responsible for her disappearance. However, Mark cooperated fully, providing a verifiable alibi. He had been attending a spring break gathering with friends on South Padre Island at the time Tanisha vanished. With both primary associates apparently cleared, investigators faced the grim possibility that Tanisha had been abducted by a stranger after walking away from Timothy's apartment. As the days stretched into a week, the community mobilized. Gayla Taylor organized search parties, knocking on doors and combing the wooded areas surrounding Timothy's apartment complex. The search took a tense turn when a local resident reported hearing gunshots in the nearby woods on the night of Tanisha's disappearance. Canine units were dispatched to the scene, and the search dogs quickly alerted to a scent. Investigators pushed through the dense underbrush, expecting the worst, only to locate the remains of a deceased wild animal. While the discovery brought temporary relief to the family, it did not bring them any closer to finding Tanisha. However, as detectives continued to interview residents of the apartment complex, a series of highly unusual and disturbing reports began to emerge regarding Timothy Shepard's behavior in the days following Tanisha's disappearance. Several neighbors recalled that on the Friday and Saturday after Tanisha went missing, Timothy spent an extraordinary amount of time at the apartment complex's outdoor grilling area. He reportedly had 2 large smokers operating continuously, producing an immense volume of thick, dark smoke. The smoke became so overwhelming that worried residents called the fire department, fearing a structure fire. When firefighters arrived, Timothy explained that he was preparation cooking a massive quantity of meat for an upcoming church function. A firefighter who entered the apartment to ensure the safety of the premises reported seeing what appeared to be raw meat soaking in a bathtub filled with water, which seemed to corroborate Timothy's explanation. A second resident reported an even more alarming detail. she had observed Timothy scrub his outdoor patio area with a massive quantity of chemical bleach. The odor was so intense that it caused the neighbors' eyes to water, a level of cleaning that seemed entirely disproportionate for a simple barbecue session. These reports, combined with the family's revelation that Timothy had previously exhibited physical violence toward Tanisha, including an incident where he had choked her during an argument, forced investigators to reevaluate Timothy as their primary suspect. Desperate for answers, Tanisha's family contacted a prominent local community activist named Quannell X, known for his ability to facilitate communication between law enforcement and members of the community. Interestingly, Timothy's family had also reached out to Quannell, seeking protection for Timothy from what they perceived as overzealous police scrutiny. Recognizing the delicate nature of the situation, Quannell agreed to meet with Timothy privately at his apartment. During the tense, face-to-face meeting, which took place in the privacy of Timothy's bathroom to avoid potential surveillance, Quannell observed that Timothy was under immense emotional stress. He looked Timothy in the eye and asked him directly if he had harmed Tanisha. The psychological pressure proved too great for Timothy to maintain his deception. He put his head down and confessed that during their argument on Thursday morning, he had flown into a rage when Tanisha attempted to leave. He blocked the door, grabbed her by the throat, and strangled her to death. Timothy further revealed that in a panic, he had placed her body in a large trash dumpster located at the rear of the apartment complex. Quannell immediately contacted investigator Sidney Miller, and a coordinated effort was made to secure the dumpster. However, when investigators arrived at the scene, they discovered the dumpster had been emptied by the Municipal Waste Management Services just hours prior. The realization was devastating. The trash from that specific dumpster had already been transported to a massive regional landfill. Homicide detectives consulted with waste management experts and determined that searching the landfill, which contained thousands of tons of compacted refuse, would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars and offered an extremely low probability of success. In a display of profound dignity, Tanisha's family requested that the county not waste public funds on a futile search. The lack of a physical body presented a significant legal obstacle for the prosecution. Shortly after his confession to Quannell, Timothy invoked his right to legal counsel and refused to cooperate further with investigators. To secure a conviction, crime scene investigators returned to Timothy's apartment, determined to find microscopic evidence of the crime. They utilized advanced forensic techniques to search the kitchen and bathroom areas. Their meticulous efforts paid off when they dismantled the kitchen sink's garbage disposal unit. Inside, they discovered tiny bone fragments and a small piece of dental material. Forensic analysis subsequently confirmed that the dental material was enamel from one of Tanisha's teeth. Furthermore, investigators discovered charred bone fragments in the soil surrounding the outdoor grill area. While these fragments were too severely damaged by heat to yield viable deoxyribonucleic acid profiles, the discovery, combined with the neighbors' reports of continuous smoking and the raw meat in the bathtub, suggested a horrific reality. Timothy had not merely placed Tanisha in a dumpster. He had attempted to incinerate her remains to destroy the physical evidence of his crime. On September 29, 2008, the trial of Timothy Shepard commenced. The prosecution presented the circumstantial evidence, the forensic tooth enamel, the neighbor's testimony regarding the abnormal grilling, and the testimony of Quannell X, who recounted Timothy's detailed confession. The defense argued that without a physical body, the state could not definitively prove a homicide had occurred, suggesting the confession was coerced or unreliable. However, the prosecution delivered a decisive blow when they called Timothy's own cousin, Nicholas Shepard, to the stand. Nicholas testified that prior to the crime, Timothy had made a chilling statement during a conversation about relationship troubles, declaring that if Tanisha ever tried to leave him, he would kill her, dismember her, and boil her remains. In a desperate bid to mitigate his sentence during the penalty phase, Timothy took the witness stand, attempting to claim he had acted in self-defense. He asserted that Tanisha had wielded a knife during their argument and that he had only grabbed her neck to protect himself, blacking out during the struggle. However, when pressed by the prosecution regarding the disposal of her body, Timothy admitted under oath that he had placed her remains in a smoker rather than a standard grill. This admission of calculated, disrespectful desecration of a human being destroyed any lingering sympathy the jury might have felt. The jury returned a verdict of guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced Timothy Shepard to 99 years in prison, the maximum sentence permitted under the law. For Tanisha's family, the trial brought a painful closure. While they could never recover her body, they succeeded in securing justice for a young woman whose bright light was tragically extinguished by a possessive, narcissistic individual unable to accept her independence and success. Chapter 3: The Shadow over the Sanctuary. The landscapes of Raleigh and Durham, North Carolina, are characterized by their academic prestige, historic charm, and tight-knit community networks. In this environment, the institutions of higher learning and local religious organizations often serve as pillars of support and moral guidance. Yet, in January of 2008, a shocking crime would expose a dark undercurrent of deception, closeted obsession, and violence involving a promising young college student, a rising athletic star, and a widely respected community spiritual leader. The investigation began on the cold morning of Wednesday, January 30th, 2008, at approximately 7:30 in the morning. Morning commuters traveling along Interstate 540, a busy freeway loop bypass north of Raleigh, noticed a disturbing sight in the grassy median off the shoulder of the road. Multiple calls were placed to emergency dispatchers, reporting what appeared to be a human body. First responders arrived quickly and confirmed the tragic reality. A young woman was lying deceased in the grass. The initial assessment suggested the possibility of a hit-and-run pedestrian accident. However, when major crimes investigators examined the body, they immediately ruled out a traffic accident. The victim had been subjected to a savage, highly personal assault, sustaining upwards of 40 stab wounds concentrated around her face, neck, and upper torso. Her carotid artery and jugular vein had been severed, and her vocal cords had been cut, a detail that suggested the killer sought to silence her screams. During the attack, the sheer ferocity of the wounds indicated an assailant acting out of extreme, uncontrollable rage. Curiously, her valuable personal items, including her jewelry, remained intact, ruling out robbery as a motive. As investigators processed the scene, they noted that the victim's hands exhibited significant defensive wounds, with several of her fingernails broken and damaged, suggesting she had fought desperately for her life. A short distance down the interstate, a white sedan was discovered parked on the shoulder with its hazard lights flashing. A commuter named Darren Curtis, who was driving to work, slowed down to observe the backup caused by the crime scene. He saw a body covered by a blue tarp and, just a half-mile further, recognized the white sedan as belonging to his wife, 21-year-old Latrice Curtis. Panicked, Darren returned to the scene, where detectives confirmed his worst fears. The deceased young woman was indeed Latrice. Latrice Curtis was a highly popular, academically driven student who had recently transferred to North Carolina Central University in Durham to pursue a degree in business administration. She was the youngest child and the only girl in a protective, loving family, remembered for her bright smile and ambition. Just 9 months prior to her death, she had married Darren Curtis, an accounting student and former National Guard soldier whom she had met during her studies. To all outward appearances, the young couple was building a stable, happy life together. When questioned by detectives, Darren provided a detailed timeline of his movements. He stated that Latrice had called him around 10 o'clock the previous evening, explaining she was running late from her studies and planned to get some food before returning home. Darren had fallen asleep around 11:30 and, upon waking the next morning, to find she had not returned, assumed she had stayed overnight at her family's home. He attempted to call her, but the call went straight to voicemail, prompting him to prepare for work and begin his commute, which took him along Interstate 540. Detectives conducted a physical examination of Darren, finding no scratches, cuts, or bruises that would indicate involvement in a violent struggle. A search of his vehicle and the couple's apartment yielded no forensic evidence, and Darren was ruled out as a suspect. However, the forensic examination of Latrice's body introduced a stunning complication. During the autopsy, medical examiners discovered a condom lodged internally within her body. There were no physical injuries consistent with a sexual assault, suggesting that Latrice had engaged in consensual sexual activity shortly before her death. The discovery of this evidence raised critical questions. Who was the partner? And was this secret encounter the catalyst for her murder? Investigators subpoenaed Latrice's cellular phone records and discovered a high volume of communication exchange between her phone and an unfamiliar number in the hours leading up to her death. The number was traced to Stephen Randolph, a prominent, highly attractive student-athlete who played basketball for North Carolina Central University and harbored aspirations of playing in the National Basketball Association. 2 days after the discovery of Latrice's body, Stephen Randolph arrived at the sheriff's office to provide a statement. He was accompanied by his roommate and landlord, a charismatic 43-year-old local pastor and community motivational speaker named Robert Reeves. In the interrogation room, Stephen initially claimed that he and Latrice were merely classmates who studied together. However, when confronted with the forensic evidence and phone logs, Stephen admitted that they had been engaged in a passionate, secret sexual affair. Stephen explained that on the night of Tuesday, January 29th, Latrice had visited his residence, which was a basement apartment in a home owned by Pastor Reeves. They engaged in sexual intercourse, during which the condom became trapped. Unable to retrieve it, Latrice left the home around 10 o'clock at night, planning to address the issue at home. Stephen claimed that shortly after she departed, he drove to the apartment of his primary girlfriend, Velma Newton, where he stayed until approximately 1 o'clock in the morning. He asserted that during this time, Latrice called him repeatedly, expressing intense anxiety about the possibility of an unwanted pregnancy. Stephen maintained that he had nothing to do with her death and had returned home. Afterward, to verify Stephen's timeline, investigators interviewed Velma Newton. She confirmed that Stephen had arrived at her home around 10 o'clock at night, but her statement did not cover his movements after he left her apartment at 1 o'clock in the morning, which was precisely within the estimated window of Latrice's death. Velma also revealed a highly disturbing detail. For several weeks, both she and Stephen had been targeted by a series of anonymous, threatening phone calls, demanding they end their relationship. Furthermore, Stephen's vehicle had recently been targeted, with all 4 tires slashed while parked outside Velma's apartment. The investigation took a dramatic turn when detectives received a report from State Trooper Isaac Cooper. Cooper recounted that at approximately 1:30 in the morning on January 30th, while patrolling Interstate 540, he had observed 2 vehicles parked on the shoulder with their hazard lights flashing. One was a white sedan, which was later identified as Latrice's car. The other was a dark vehicle. Cooper had stopped to investigate the dark vehicle, which was empty. He ran the license plate, and the registration came back to Robert Reeves, the pastor. This revelation shifted the focus of the investigation directly onto the spiritual leader, Pastor Robert Reeves, known affectionately in the community as the Bishop, was a highly respected figure who managed a home he shared with his sister, renting the basement to Stephen Randolph. When questioned about his vehicle's presence on the interstate, Reeves claimed he had been attending a late church service and had returned straight home, suggesting Stephen must have borrowed his car without permission. However, when investigators interviewed Reeves' sister, she revealed that she had attended the same church service and that her brother was not present. Detectives also observed deep scratches and abrasions on Reeves' hands and arms. The pastor claimed he had sustained injuries while moving a heavy desk with Stephen, but when questioned separately, Stephen denied that any such accident had occurred. Furthermore, Stephen revealed a highly unusual and inappropriate encounter that had occurred between him and the pastor. Reeves had entered Stephen's room, questioned him about his sexual activity with Latrice, and made explicit sexual advances, offering to waive Stephen's rent in exchange for sexual favors. Stephen had rejected the proposal. Investigators subpoenaed Pastor Reeves' phone records and discovered that the anonymous, blocked threatening calls to Stephen and Velma had originated from Reeves' cellular phone. It became clear to the forensic psychologists analyzing the case that Robert Reeves had developed a pathological, closeted obsession with Stephen Randolph. Unable to accept Stephen's heterosexual relationships, Reeves had projected his intense jealousy onto the women in Stephen's life. When he realized Latrice was visiting Stephen's apartment for sexual encounters, his obsession turned into homicidal rage. On the night of January 29th, Reeves had followed Latrice as she drove home along Interstate 540, using his status as a trusted pastor. Or perhaps by staging an emergency, he persuaded her to pull over to the shoulder of the road. He then launched a savage attack, stabbing her 40 times before abandoning her body in the grass and driving her vehicle a half-mile down the road to confuse investigators. The definitive breakthrough came from the state crime lab. Forensic scientists analyzing the interior of Latrice's white sedan discovered a mixture of deoxyribonucleic acid on the steering wheel. The profile matched the victim and Pastor Robert Reeves. The presence of his genetic material inside her car, combined with the state trooper's eyewitness report and the scratches on his arms, provided a complete chain of evidence. On February 2, 2008, Robert Reeves was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. The trial, which commenced on September 29, 2009, exposed the double life of a man who used his religious authority as a shield for predatory behavior and obsessive violence. The defense attempted to argue that Stephen Randolph was the true killer, pointing to the presence of Stephen's deoxyribonucleic acid under Latrice's fingernails. However, the prosecution successfully demonstrated that the genetic material was the result of their consensual sexual encounter earlier that evening, whereas Reeves' presence on the interstate and his physical injuries could not be explained by any innocent means. The jury deliberated for 2 days before finding Robert Reeves guilty of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. The verdict brought a sense of relief to the community, though the pain of Latrice's tragic loss remained deeply felt by her family and husband. The case highlighted the exceptional dedication of the law enforcement officers who refused to accept initial explanations and methodically pursued the physical and psychological evidence to unmask a dangerous predator living within the community's most sacred spaces. Conclusion: the resolution of these three complex investigations underscores the fundamental truth that justice is not achieved through rapid assumptions or sensationalism, but through the patient, disciplined application of forensic science, logical reasoning, and human empathy. In each of these cases, the perpetrators sought to conceal their actions behind webs of deception, biological manipulation, and psychological shielding. Yet, the dedicated efforts of law enforcement officers, forensic scientists, and courageous community members successfully dismantled these barriers, bringing the truth to light. By studying these dark chapters of human behavior, we do not merely seek entertainment, but valuable insights into the dynamics of healthy relationships and the importance of community vigilance. Relational safety relies on mutual respect, open communication, and the recognition of personal boundaries. When these principles are replaced by possessive control, obsessive jealousy, or manipulative secrecy, the consequences can be devastating. Through the triumph of truth and the preservation of memory, we honor the lives of Wayne Irby, Tanisha Stewart, and Latrice Curtis, ensuring that their stories serve as enduring beacons of justice and hope for a safer, more compassionate society. Section 1. The illusion of ownership and the cost of independence. We begin in the state of Texas, under the vast skies of the Southern Plains, where a quiet highway north of Houston became the starting point for a complex investigation. On a Wednesday afternoon in March of 2007, investigator Sidney Miller and his partner drove down the road with heavy hearts. Sitting in their back seat were two passengers who claimed to know the whereabouts of a missing 19-year-old college student named Tanisha Stewart. She had vanished 6 days prior, on the 15th of March, leaving behind a family paralyzed by worry and a community searching for answers. Tanisha was raised in a tough Houston neighborhood, one of 6 children, and had lost her father when she was very young. Despite these hardships, she possessed an inner light and a determination that refused to be dimmed by her surroundings. She was dedicated to her studies, an academic standout, and she possessed a warm, infectious smile. Her family recognized early on that she was destined for great achievements. When she turned 17, she met Timothy Shepard, a 25-year-old coworker at a local pizza restaurant. Despite the 8-year age difference, a relationship developed. Timothy sought to ingratiate himself with her family by performing helpful tasks around the house, fixing appliances, and assisting with computers. He was embraced as a brother and a son. However, a significant transition occurred when Tanisha earned a scholarship to Texas Agricultural and Mechanical University. The campus was located nearly 2 hours away from her home in Houston. This physical distance tested the boundaries of their relationship. Within 3 months of her departure, Timothy initiated a reconciliation with a former girlfriend and subsequently broke off his relationship with Tanisha, leaving her heartbroken. Yet soon after, Timothy regretted his decision. He traveled to the university campus to surprise her, and they resumed their relationship. Upon her return, however, the dynamic had shifted. Tanisha had experienced the independence of college life, met new people, and grown as an individual. She was no longer willing to be confined by the restrictive boundaries of Timothy's possessive expectations. During spring break in March of 2007, she spent her time with friends, planning to attend a concert. This assertion of independence triggered deep-seated insecurities within Timothy. On the morning of Thursday, March 15th, after she received a telephone call from a college friend named Mark Marks, a confrontation ensued. Timothy's sense of self-worth was inextricably linked to his perceived control over Tanisha. When she began to thrive in an academic environment outside of his sphere of influence, his insecurity manifested as an intense desire to dominate and possess. The age gap, which initially might have positioned him as a more mature figure, now highlighted his stagnation in comparison to her rapid intellectual and social growth. After Tanisha's sister, Gayla, reported her missing, investigators questioned Timothy. He claimed she had walked out of his apartment and disappeared. He voluntarily consented to a search of his residence, which yielded no immediate physical evidence. Detectives then turned their attention to Mark Marks, the college friend who had phoned Tanisha. Mark cooperated fully and possessed a verified alibi, having been at a gathering on South Padre Island during the time in question. With the primary suspects seemingly cleared, investigators faced the chilling prospect of a stranger abduction. However, neighbors soon reported highly unusual activity at Timothy's apartment. In the days following Tanisha's disappearance, he had been operating multiple outdoor grills, producing an overwhelming amount of smoke that prompted a call to emergency services. When first responders arrived, Timothy claimed he was preparing food for a large church gathering of nearly 200 people. A fireman noted what appeared to be meat soaking in a bathtub. Additionally, a neighbor observed Timothy scrubbing his patio with a concentration of bleach so strong that it irritated the eyes of passers-by. These disturbing details shifted the focus back to Timothy. Realizing the limitations of the official investigation at that stage, Tanisha's family contacted a prominent community activist named Quannell X. Timothy's family had also reached out to the activist, hoping to protect Timothy from perceived police misconduct. Quannell X arranged a private meeting with Timothy at his apartment. Sensing Timothy's extreme distress, Quannell X confronted him directly in the bathroom, asking if he had harmed Tanisha. Timothy broke down and confessed to strangling her in a fit of jealous rage when she refused to discuss her relationship with Mark Marks. Timothy claimed he had placed her body in a